There's certain NBA players who at one point make you believe they have a ton of potential in the future. Guys that make you go, he just needs one more year, one more year, one more year. Well, today we're looking at 10 of those players that it's just time to give up on, because that one more year until they break out is just never coming. And I'd like to start off first with Ben Simmons. One more year is what we all said every year he was in Philly, and clearly it just never happened. And this is the guy that was referred to as the next LeBron James, the 6'10 player who had it all, and now he's nothing more than just a role player. And there's been very few times in NBA history we've seen a player fall off as quickly as Ben has. At least in Philly he was an all-star, but now on the Nets he's in an even better system for him to thrive in as a player, and he's done the opposite. His problems with his injuries have held him back, mental issues were a huge hurdle for him last year, and now that back surgery he had may have taken him out for good. You see, it's the same thing we saw happen to Dwight Howard. He left Orlando, had back surgery, and was never the same player. But at least he was so talented before the surgery that when he fell off he was still able to be an all-star. While for Ben, it's made him nothing more than a role player. Listen, all I'm saying is that at one point he had everyone pulling for him and people just thinking maybe he was in the wrong system and didn't fit well with Joel Embiid. And currently he's a max player, but if he had to sign a new contract today, he wouldn't be anything close to it. But while speaking of the Nets, when D'Angelo Russell played for them, he convinced a lot of people that he was well on his way to being a star. It was that one season where the Nets were expected to be bad after trading for D'Lo, but then he made the All-Star team and led them to the playoffs. It was only his 4th season and he was 22, so it was a great start to his career, or at least so we thought, because ever since then he hasn't really done anything. He had an okay half year in Golden State, then was brought into the Timberwolves to take them to the next level like he did for Brooklyn, but he actually hasn't made any difference at all. Then last year we saw how Minnesota was better with him off the floor in the playoffs. Listen, right now he's 26, about to be 27, so he went from being picked 2nd overall to being an up and coming star with a lot of potential to now just being a slightly above average point guard. He never took that leap to the next level, and clearly if he hasn't done it by now, then he's not gonna, and it's time to give up hope that he ever will. Now we're gonna go right back to the subject of the Brooklyn Nets to mention Kyrie Irving, and it's time to give up on this dude. For the Cavs, he was approaching superstar status, and only 1 or 2 point guards stood in the way of him being the best in the league. But then he leaves, and ever since then his off-court issues have ruined what should have been an all-time great career. After that final series and that Game 7 shot, he was on pace to be a future Hall of Famer without a doubt. Then he leaves Cleveland so he can be the go-to guy, gets to the Celtics and couldn't do exactly that, got to the Nets and wouldn't get vaccinated, basically ruining the entire year for Brooklyn, and now barely even into the season he instantly got suspended due to his off-court actions again. And it's like, it was getting old watching him only play away games for an entire year, but now for this to happen right away, it really has just gotten old. It's hard to watch so much potential go to waste, and all this happens way too often, which is why I'm giving up any possibility that he'll ever go back to that Cavs form or make it through an entire season again without some major distraction or controversy coming up. And with that said, I don't know that any star can win again with him on their team. I mean, look what happened already. He drove James Harden out of Brooklyn, and KD tried to get out in the offseason but wasn't able to. So definitely not a good look. And speaking of someone who shouldn't be considered a star anymore, sadly that can be said for Klay Thompson. Listen, I don't want to put the hurt on him like Barkley did, but Charles was right. He's just not the same player he used to be. The debate used to be between Klay and James Harden on who was the best shooting guard in the NBA. That was a conversation that was being had at one point, and I thought when Thompson came back for the second half of last season, it was just him and his body adjusting to getting back on the court after 2 years and 2 devastating injuries. But the way he's come out this year has proved that that wasn't the case, which is why I think we should give up on the fact that he'll ever return to his old self. On the stat sheet, he hasn't really missed a beat, which is nice, but he doesn't impact games like he used to. Don't get me wrong, he's still a great shooting guard and contributes to the Warriors' success, but his explosiveness is gone and his defense isn't all there. Shout out to Klay for coming back at all, especially after an Achilles injury, but we also have to still be honest here. And I can honestly say Kristaps Porzingis is never gonna be a star. Personally, I've known this one for a while, but I think collectively as a whole we should all give up on the belief that it's gonna happen, because it's not. In Kristaps' 3rd year, he was 22 years old and he broke out, averaging 22 a game and becoming an all-star. And it was at that point that he kinda peaked. I mean, that was it. That was the best we've seen him. He got traded to the Mavs after that, and it was his chance to break out even further, playing on a new team with a superstar, but he never did. He was 7 foot 3 inches tall, playing on the perimeter, never once backing down smaller players, using his size to his advantage, and not nearly being the defensive stopper they had hoped for. So he averaged a solid 20 points a game for his time there, and now is on the Wizards, where absolutely nothing has changed. It's come out since then that the Mavs actually told him to play the style he had been out on the perimeter, so that wasn't actually his fault, but to see that he's been pretty much the same player now on a 3rd team, and it's a wrap for him. Not even to mention his injury history and how he hasn't played 60 games in a season since 2016. I mean, even his All-Star year, he didn't play in the All-Star game because he tore his ACL. So not not only is he injury prone, but he's been pretty disappointing on the court too. And speaking of disappointing, it must hurt bad for LiAngelo Ball to have his dad hype up him and his brothers saying they'll all play in the NBA one day, just for him to be the only one that's never done so. He's by far the worst brother, and every few months you hear about him getting to play in the summer league or a G League opportunity or even signed with a team, but then he gets waived right after. And he's gotten waived by his brother's own team, the Charlotte Hornets, 2 times already after LaMelo got him workouts. And if he can't make it onto a team for over a month or even get close to stepping on an NBA floor with a connection like that, then he's definitely not going to find his way onto any NBA team. So it's time to give up on the idea that LiAngelo will ever make it, because it just wasn't meant to be. What also wasn't meant to be is for Marvin Bagley to be a good NBA player. Throughout high school and even college, Marvin and Michael Porter Jr. were like 1A and 1B on who was better. They were thought to have been the 2 best players in the nation and the top 2 picks at one point, with neither of them having a clear edge. Well, Bagley went 2nd and Porter Jr. went 14th thanks to having back problems before the draft. Well, as it turns out, MPJ has still been by far the better player even with an injured back. Bagley's had a rocky start to his career with injuries of his own and everything, but it's very clear that his game just didn't translate to the NBA. He's a bench player on 95% of teams right now because he's just not great at any one thing. Like, he's only 23, so it's still extremely early, but we've seen guys like this and it just never ends out well. And Marvin Bagley is never gonna play like a 2nd overall pick should. Taking it one step further, Markelle Fultz is never gonna play like a 1st overall pick should. He's not gonna have a Hall of Fame career, he's not gonna be the star of any team, and he's not even gonna be an all-star. Personally, I'm always pulling for Markelle, but if we're being realistic, he's gonna be a solid role player from here on out. I get for some people that this might be obvious already, but for others out there, I feel like there's still a lot of people who think Fultz is still on the come up, and this is all part of a redemption arc or something. I think there's still people that believe he can get back to playing on the level that he was supposed to be at, but I'm here to tell you that it's most likely not happening. On paper, his career so far has been rough, and it's not even like he started to show signs of his shoulder and his shot getting better. He's just learned how to play without shooting threes, and when he does shoot them, he hasn't shot over 25% in a season. I am kind of shocked though that it's been this bad and has just never come back for him. I really thought his shot would have eventually, but if it's already been like 5 years and still nothing, then this is just gonna be who he is. I think a topic that some people have kept their eyes on over the years is Giannis Antetokounmpo's brothers, but I think now we can officially say that none of them are gonna be the next Giannis or anything close to it. There's 4 brothers in total, and Kostas and Thanasis have been in the NBA for a couple seasons now, and I think it's kind of always been clear that they weren't really gonna be good players. But on and off for a few years, I kept hearing about the youngest brother Alex and how he could maybe be another potential star, and I don't remember where these talks came from or why they happened, but he's 21 years old, which is still young, but seeing how he's going into his 2nd year in the G League, I think it's fair to say that he's most likely not going to be anything close to another Giannis, and will definitely end up with more closer to the skill sets of Thanasis and Kostas. Then finally, this one may be controversial, but I want to get your guys' opinions on this one. Anthony Edwards has been talked about as a future superstar and MVP candidate one day due to his skill on the court at such a young age, but at this young of an age, he's already been pretty controversial. It started even before the draft when he said he would prefer to have gotten drafted in the NFL over the NBA because he's still not really into playing basketball, which wasn't a good sign. And already this season he had the Popeyes thing, which actually wasn't a huge deal, but he's also been openly critical of the Wolves and saying that he can't play with 2 big men without even making it 10 games to try, and now he's out here giving up entire possessions. Even last year I talked about the fact that I thought he had MVP potential without a doubt, but now I'm just starting to wonder if he's going to get in the way of himself and if he actually has the drive and work ethic like a guy like Donovan Mitchell has to get better. Comment your thoughts on him down below, like and subscribe, and I'm out.